Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Stock Market Today for Tuesday, February 11th. It's Alissa Coram here. A mildly mixed day on Wall Street and stocks still trading in a choppy range. Here now to discuss the action is my colleague, Ed Carson. Ed, nice to see you.
Nice to see you. I want to take a look at Shopify, Hilton, and Tesla.
Okay, we'll take a look at those stocks, but first, we've got to analyze those major indexes and see what we can glean from that. Other than chop, I think, Ed, it does seem like the one positive here is it does seem like the volatility for the moment is contracting versus these huge swings up and down, mixed action, but at least some tight spreads here.
Yeah, so that's positive. I mean, like it's for the second straight day, I think all the major indexes traded within the range of Friday, which is sort of trading within the range from a couple weeks before. So you're right. It does seem to be narrowing. We do have the consumer price index tomorrow. So that could be something that adds to volatility. So we'll just have to see. The NASDAQ just held the 50-day line. It really wouldn't take much for it to get to record highs, but obviously
Right.
one bad day and it would start looking weak. And that's the kind of market we're in.
Yeah, lots of crosswinds, headwinds, headlines for investors to digest. All right, well, let's take a look at the S&P 500 next. Whereas the Nasdaq was down about 0.4% today, the S&P 500 by the end of the session eked out a tiny gain here. Ed.
Yeah, I mean, just trading very flat. This is looking a little healthier. Really could just take one good day and we're above all-time highs. So looking pretty healthy all in all, but just not. It's just not environment where we're buying a lot of stocks is necessarily that it's higher risk.
It is. If you look underneath the surface, there are plenty of stocks that are working and have worked
Yes.
well, but then there are others not so much. So kind of a mixed bag there.
Hmm.
But it definitely, I think, makes stock selection very important as well as risk management rules, which is why it's so great, I think, to be an active trader because it helps with these choppy markets. And we'll talk about Tesla as kind of an example of how things can go against you. So not only are we looking at the S&P's high of 61.28 from a couple of weeks ago, but IBD senior market strategist Mike Webster is also really looking closely at the highs from the December time frame, and that's that 60.99 area. So we'll keep tabs on that as well. Also on the upside today, the Dow up about 0.3% here. Ed, your assessment of blue chips.
Yeah, I mean, that's trading pretty nicely, finding support at the 21-day line, the 50-day line. There's a little bit of room. So this is sort of the nicest looking chart in some ways, but it hasn't been, the relative strength has not been that impressive over time. But yeah, this is acting fine.
Yeah. And I guess, it's 30 stocks here. So, hey, if there is some interesting action here, then it's time to look underneath the surface, right? Okay, well, what are the stocks in here that are really those standouts?
Yeah.
And now let's take a look at the Russell 2000 representing the small caps and continuing to see weakness here, Ed.
Yeah, just a few days ago, it actually got above the 50-day line for the first time in quite a while. But now it's losing ground. It's starting to lose distance even as the 50-day line is clearly going down. So below the 21-day line, there's some breadth among growth stocks, which
Mm.
you can see with QQEW, but not really, the Russell and other things. So this held up reasonably well. Yeah, it fell the same amount as the NASDAQ, but it's just below all-time highs. This Chris Kessler was talking about this on IBD Live today, and this is basically probably the best looking of those indexes and equal weight ETFs that we have.
Yeah, QQEW. I like the tech sector, so I'm a fan of this action. All right. Well, speaking of equal weighted, let's also take a look at RSP, which represents the S&P 500 equal weighted ETF. It does seem like the volatility is contracting here as well.
Contracting here as well, really important area, holding right around the 50-day line. Again, I mean, it's just a broken record. It could easily look very strong, and it would also easily look very weak. And I just think that you have to be thinking, how can I scale in or scale out of positions or into the market or out of, depending on things, not all or one. It's not like, oh, if we go up 1%, you just jump into the deep end. There's nothing wrong, with just sort of gradually going in and seeing if making sure that things work out for you.
Absolutely. And, Ed, if you're a broken record, is it Groundhog Day? When's Groundhog Day coming up? I feel like
Well, it's been there, but we got at least 6
you
weeks
had
of
it?
this, it seems like. We've had 6
Uh,
weeks of Chop, but,
all right. All right. Okay, next on the list, always love your perspective on what's going on with the bond market. Notable action today in your view, or what should we make of it?
now it's starting to get interesting because it's at the 21-day line. Now, if it moves up from here, you would see it's sort of clearly breaking the trend line, kind of thing from that. It's a pretty steep trend line, but sort of bouncing. Fed Chief Powell began congressional testimony today, and it really wasn't that interesting, to be honest with you. Said pretty much what he had said at the last Fed meeting. Tomorrow we get the CPI report, and then Powell will testify some more. So he may have something interesting to say about the CPI. Again,
Hmm.
this is coming off lows, and it's at the long end. The shorter end not rising as much, and the actual T bills I don't think rose at all. So in some ways, this is positive for the banks. We saw some banks doing pretty well today because the
Hmm.
yield curve is normalizing. So there's that. So that was an area that was had a mildly positive day.
Yeah, here's a look at XLF up 0.3% on the day after showing relative weakness in Monday's session. Okay, moving on, let's take a look at Shopify out of the software sector. Earnings out and the stock volatile, but an upside reversal closing up 3% on the day. So good action here, I would say, overall, Ed, clearing some key levels, showing strength. What do you make of the action here today for Shopify?
Yeah, all of that. I mean, the buy point really originally was 115.37, but it came down. So it came down to that level, came down to the 21-day line. If you look at an intraday chart, this was all over the place to start. This is one reason why we talk about not buying, because you don't know how things are going to go. If you bought near the very open, you could have been down 8% 15, 20 minutes later, and you didn't know that this was going to bounce back, and it did, but you didn't know that. So going back to a daily, you could definitely use the top of this consolidation as another buy point, I think. I
Right.
mean, so it bounced there, and while the pattern had sort of been wedgy in the last several days, today's action actually did provide a shakeout. So there were some positive actions. Why wait a while? Okay, it's strengthening up. A lot of volume. It was a strange report because they didn't actually release earnings numbers right away, and it's still. I think they did come out. It's like a little bit odd, like 215%. But there was a lot of strange things with the report to start, but ultimately strong growth. Ultimately, a solid reaction. The relative strength line is at a new high. So a lot of nice things about this
Mm.
chart. Just would have been tricky to start. This is why we talk about
Yeah,
waiting, but it did work out.
exactly. And this continues to show, I would say, overall leadership out of the software sector. There have been some exceptions. ServiceNow, we know, one that did not have a favorable response to results. And there have been others in this sector that have gone up 10, 15, 20 plus percent after their reports versus just 3% here. But relative strength at a new high and I would say the risk here that you're taking on versus a 20 or 30% gap up, this is not too stretched from those shorter term moving averages. So definitely something to think about there.
Yeah, and one other thing is that not only the software is strong, but e-commerce is strong. You look at a
True.
lot of e-commerce names around the world, and a lot of them are doing well, and Shopify is definitely part of that.
Great point there. Okay, let's go over to Hilton in the leisure lodging group. An upside reversal here. Going back to last week, Hilton had earnings, a favorable response there, a breakout of a base, and it is still trading in the buy zone here as this theme, the travel and leisure area, is showing strength as well.
Yeah, so it was a nice action today because actually Marriott came out today, and those results were
Mm,
not very strong.
right.
As I recall, it came down because
Hmm.
that had broken out on Hilton, but Marriott's guidance wasn't so good. So Hilton, though, uh, solid earnings, and so it's holding in there. So, often stocks will pull back a little bit. Didn't come all the way to the buy point, didn't even come to the 10-day line. So it's strengthened here. So it just shows, it looks like it's a leader in this area. This is not going to have massive growth. I mean, this is not, I don't want to talk about, this is not the same as some kind of high beta stock that's going to go up, that has, amazing triple digit earnings growth, but it's a solid grower here. And the travel theme is doing well. The relative strength line, after not really doing a whole lot, but it's sort of trending vaguely higher, now
Mhm,
again after, and there had been a solid gain in 2023. So this is
mhm.
another one of this, definitely seems to be the leader in the hotel group right now.
Okay. And going the other way, Tesla down 6.3% today. Now it's fifth down day in a row here, Ed. A lot of volume behind today's selling, marking the stock's lowest levels going back a couple of months here, back to the November time frame. And Tesla did trigger some sell signals here before today, including sell signals that I took myself, including a break of the 10-week line and an undercut of the 373 level. The stock today closing at 328.50. So I'm glad I sold a couple of days ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the point. It's just, I did this with Freshpet yesterday and this today. Like, there's sometimes stock will just drop 30%, and you're sort of stuck. But this one gave some opportunities to get out, and most people could have gotten out with profit, or at least go like, so if you bought at the November 6th breakout, you
Hmm.
basically got 200 points or so, and it's given up the vast majority of that. And so you'd still be up here, but you've given up. You probably would have wanted to have scaled out at least some of that when it broke through the
Hmm.
50-day line, 10-week line, got it
Yep.
getting underneath. For those who bought at that shelf in late November, kind of like in November, early December, those gains are gone. So you definitely would have wanted to get out just to protect yourself. And so it's just that, that's just something you have to watch out for. No matter how much excitement there is in a stock, and it had such strength that really it showed, had real buy signals. Right now it's not. And it's
Hmm.
just, it may turn around again. I think it's also another thing, people say, oh, it'll come back. And well, it often has. And obviously, it just hit a record high just a month or so ago. But there have been times to buy Tesla, and there were a couple of
Hmm.
times a couple months ago. And there's times when it's not. You don't know where this is going to drop. This could drop to 300. It could drop to the top of the old base, which is where the 200-day line basically is. You don't know. And it doesn't have to stop there. I mean, you just don't know. And I mean, that's with any stock. We talk about buying on fundamentals and technicals, but you definitely want to be selling on technicals. So you gave, yeah. So there probably would have, so those are just things you don't have to sell all at once, but you would have definitely depending on where you bought it, definitely would have been starting scaling out. Uh,
Hmm.
you want to make sure that if you get a big gain, you want to be able to capture most of that. You're not going to capture every bit of it. You're not going to sell at the very top, but you want to get a big chunk of it. And so, yeah, I just think it's just worth looking at that.
Yeah, great thoughts there, Ed. And I think the temptation to hold is there, especially with a fellow Magnificent Seven stock like Nvidia
Yeah.
trying to make a comeback here. Maybe some folks thinking, oh, well, maybe, I shouldn't have sold. See, it bounced right back. But there's no guarantee that that is
Yeah.
going to happen. And there's no guarantee that this is going to continue to bounce back. So the temptation is there. But I think that over the long run, it definitely pays off to heed the warning and the opportunity cost. Hey, shift into areas that are working versus just holding and hoping, and it being dead money. You may have that rare scenario of an immediate bounce back, but we just know, studying chart history, that that's not the overwhelmingly favorable odd uh
Yeah, you don't want to be playing the low
happening.
odds. You want to do that
Yeah.
Hunger Games to make the odds always be in your favor. That's really, you really should be trying to
Exactly.
do that. And this is just not that situation. There were times recently where it was, and now it's not.
Yes. Okay, well, let's check out some earnings movers after the close. Well, we'll see if they're moving. DoorDash earnings out. Full disclosure, I do own this one. It looks like the early reaction here, shares up 4%. Ed, I'm not sure what the numbers are, but it looks like the street likes the results.
Yeah, it looked like the earnings were just in line and the revenue was
Mm,
barely beating. I don't know all the other metrics. I mean, maybe, there's various metrics that DoorDash uses and others, but strong reaction,
Mm.
even stronger to Confluent and Upstart. Those were CFLT. And again, I haven't seen the numbers here, but there is sort of like a huge consolidation. So, but you could use 3210 as a handle within this base, or as a handle, or use 3410 as the handle to a gigantic one. Either
Mhm.
way, it looks like it's big moves there.
And
Upstart.
and for Confluent, sorry to just jump in
Oh,
here.
no, no.
What sector is it in? Software. Like
Software. Yeah,
we're continuing to see these big moves from software names. Go ahead, Ed. You were saying
absolutely. Upstart, and this is
Upstart.
AI data lending, and this one has big moves. And
Both
again, we will
ways.
say this with all these things:
Yeah.
the initial overnight action may not hold,
Translate.
may
A-Lab, a great
translate.
example.
Yeah, absolutely. And but Upstart, big move. Again, they didn't have great days. Like, you didn't know. It wasn't a great reaction heading in. People say, "Oh, people knew something." No, they didn't know anything about Upstart or or Confluent today. They both sold
Right.
off, but huge
Mhm.
gains here. One other name would be SMCI. This has been a real loser
Mhm.
for a while now. I know it's bounced back, but it's been trading all over the place. It had some big moves up and down. So those are a few of the names that are moving after hours.
Okay, thank you, Ed. We'll have to keep tabs on all of these stocks in the regular session tomorrow and see how the action shakes up. Will we get another Shopify with an upside reversal? Will we see a downside reversal or weak action like we saw with A-Lab today? So many different possibilities, and we will talk about it all tomorrow morning on IBD Live. So looking forward to that. Ed, as always, fantastic to get your perspective.
Thank you so much.
All right, everyone, that is it from us for today. And as I mentioned, we'll be back tomorrow morning on IBD Live, starting 10 minutes before the opening bell and going through the first hour and a half plus of trade. Hour plus of trade. Sometimes we go for an hour and a half. We have so much fun. Actually, a lot of times we do. We have so much fun in the mornings with everyone, interacting with our audience, talking about actionable trade ideas, overall market conditions, and so much more. So we really look forward to seeing you all in the morning. And then, of course, we will see you back here tomorrow after the close. See you then.